Welcome to That Entrepreneur Life, a podcast about entrepreneurship that takes you from idea to launch and beyond. Each week, your hosts, Andrew Lees and Clint McPherson, discuss different business topics aimed at adding value to any entrepreneur's journey.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. I'm Andrew Lees, and I'm here with my co-host, Clint McPherson. What's up, man?
Not much, my man. What is going on, everybody? I'm excited to be here for another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. So let's go ahead and kick this thing off, though, by welcoming our special guest, Ryan Rosoff, to the show.
How you guys doing? Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, Ryan, it's great to have you on the show. Before we kind of get into everything and ask you a few questions here, can you just give us a quick intro about yourself?
Sure. I'm 74 years old. I'm from.
I was going to say, you look good for 74, man.
Yeah, I grew up. I know. It's clean living.
Yeah.
I grew up in Seattle and I've moved basically all over the United States. Spent most of my life on the West Coast. Been back on the East Coast actually for about the last 6 years. And then moved back to the West Coast here in a couple months, which we can get into a little bit. But you guys know, and as our audience will come to find out, I have a couple different hats that I wear. I own a team building company, a corporate team building company based in Silicon Valley. And I also front a band called Little King, where I write the words and the music and play guitar and scream at the top of my lungs as well. I've been doing that for about 23 years. Working on our 7th album actually here next month. So we just released one late last year and moving into the 7th record, which is pretty cool. So that's me.
Yeah, brother. I mean that you have a lot going on. You have a lot on your plate, it sounds like, right? And even just researching before we got on about what you're all about, man, I'm like, dude, how does this guy do it? But with all that said, brother, as the founder of Team Building ROI, right, a company you just briefly mentioned, as well as a forming band member, a guitarist, right, a singer, songwriter, I assume the lead lyricist, right, for Little King, can you take us back to where your entrepreneurial journey started and what it is about entrepreneurship specifically, brother, that you're passionate about?
Yeah, well, I mean, the end of that question is I am an awful employee and I'm a great boss. And I kind of learned that the hard way by doing a little bit of both. So you clearly want to work for me, but you probably don't want to hire me, you know? So I learned that, as I said, going through my journey over the last, 30 years of working jobs. I actually got a degree in creative writing in the mid-'90s from University of Texas, El Paso, where I had settled down, did the first couple of years of my education at the University of Arizona in Tucson, followed a Mexican girl to El Paso, married her, had a child. I'm actually repping my UTEP today.
Yeah, there you. I saw it when you stood up.
So I studied a lot of things as I was going through college. I had no inclination at that point of going into business for myself. I really wanted to be a writer. And so I was always into music and I was always into writing lyrics and poetry and written a couple screenplays and a bunch of short stories. It was something that always came really easily for me. And I grew up in a family, fortunately of pretty literate people. All of my, both my parents are big time readers and my brother is an English major as well. So it just came easily to me. I think I was sort of intrinsically and inherently lazy back in the day. So, when you get to college, you don't really know what you're going to do. But I knew that was something that came easily to me and that I could excel at pretty easily. So I took the path of least resistance. And, as I made my first record in 1997, is an album called Trans Mountain with Little King. And it was definitely a demo. It was one of those ones that only the people very close to me have ever heard. I think it's really difficult to find. Even on eBay, I think there may be one copy. It's like 39 cents. I think they pay you to listen to it. But, with Trans Mountain, I got my feet wet in the business and I was much more successful in terms of promoting it than I think I was the actual creation of the record. So I think what happened was, once I got out of college and I relocated back to Seattle, I met a guy named Paul Holbrook, who was really my mentor in the music business as well as, taught me some things about legal, and he has very much of an entrepreneurial spirit as well. So what I came to find out is that I was pretty good at promoting myself. As embarrassing as that kind of was, I became a promoter, and other bands started coming at me. And keep in mind, this is the late '90s. This is before, this is still dial-up, guys. We were babies. We were wee lads, back then. So it was even before Napster. I mean, there was no file sharing. I had a website that took, 30 minutes up, to load. So we really came from the school of flyering and, paper flyers and phone calls to promoters and giant press kits that were this thick, like encyclopedias, mailing them out to radio stations and to record labels and the clubs to try and get shows. So as I became more and more involved in that, I started my first business called Little King Productions, ironically enough, in 2000, and I did that for 6 years. So that was really my first foray into being an entrepreneur, taking something, some things that I was passionate about, which was writing and promotion as well as music, and turning that into a little cottage industry for myself. So I did that for about 6 years, and that was really my intro into what it was like to be an entrepreneur.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great that you kind of, that came naturally in a way, right? Like the business, first of all, your self-promotion of your band came naturally to you, obviously, and something that you were like, oh, hey, maybe there's something to this. But then also the demand just came to you, which, I always think that that's such a great way to start a business, when people come to you and they say, hey, I'll pay you to do this particular task. And you're like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, I guess, sure. Instead of,
that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Instead of sometimes it's so much easier to go about it that way, but you kind of have to, in a way, you have to not stumble into it. Right. But like you have to, you have to set the pieces, you have to align the pieces up, right? You have to do, like you had to become a musician in order to figure that out, that, hey, this is something that, that maybe the promotion part of it, I could turn into a business. But in a way, it just happens so organically, instead of saying, all right, I want to be a promoter, knowing nothing about it. And then trying to force that on the industry, which still works. But for you, I'm sure it just came a lot more naturally.
Well, it's the oldest cliche in the book, right? And I'm sure you guys hear it all the time when you're interviewing entrepreneurs, is follow your passion and the money will come. And I know it's a cliche, and I have two kids. One of them, I have a 23-year-old daughter, and I have an almost 14-year-old son. And they're always asking me, my 23-year-old still is asking me, what am I going to do with my life? And my mantra has always been, look, you wake up and you're doing something that you love and you're passionate about. Don't worry so much about the money. You'll be good at the things that you're drawn towards. You'll be naturally predisposed to being good at it. So I think that was kind of my path. The other thing too, guys, I mean, in full disclosures, I get bored easily. It's hard to hold my interest for a long period of time. I've owned this team building company almost, for a little over 9 years now. And it's by far and away the longest I've ever been at something as an advocate, as a profession. I've certainly been a musician longer, but for me, there's so much to do, and there's so many interesting things in such a short, finite amount of time that we have spinning around. So to me, if I'm going to be vested in something and involved with something, it has to be something where I wake up every morning and I'm geeked. And I haven't lost that passion, certainly for music and for team building. Although obviously, we're living in a weird time where team building it has changed dramatically in the last 4 months for us, because quite literally, in Silicon Valley, it's illegal to perform our services unless we're doing it virtually. You can't do groups of 30 people in person. So, and we can talk a little bit about that, and from an entrepreneurial standpoint, how hard we had to pivot in March when all of this madness came down. So, I mean, the entrepreneur thing found me. I didn't necessarily find it, but boy, like I said, after that, I went back for a few years. I taught high school for a couple of years down in Texas. I was actually an English teacher, which was fun. Talk about bureaucracy and not being a great employee. I mean, my kids loved me. I think the administration probably wasn't my biggest fan, but then went and worked in the event entertainment business, had a couple really bad bosses in that skew as well. So was certainly drawn, as soon as I could, to make a move and get back to being able to make my own schedule, my own time, and pursue the things that I was passionate about. So, here we are in 2020, 9 years after that, and somehow we made it work.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's good that you experience all those different things too. You did work for somebody else, you did that thing, and writing was a passion of yours, I'm sure. So you got to see what it was like to teach. And I can say that I would not be a good teacher. I would get way too impatient, and and the bureaucracy of it would be difficult to kind of cut through. But it's great that you didn't just, go into, you tried a few different things out, and you tried being an employee, and you owned a business, and you did, and you kind of figured out what made the most sense from you, so you could really grow as a business owner, and so.
I think important point to make too, Andrew, is that with what I do now, with team building, it's sort of a combination or an amalgamation of all of the different disciplines that I've gathered through the years with my various, my gypsy life, my gypsy career. I call it career ADHD. And so it's really been picking and choosing the things and the different parts of each one of those disciplines that has sort of combined into what I do now. For example, with education, obviously, team building, there's an element of psychology and education that goes to that. There's also, a big element of event planning, which I've done off and on throughout my entire life as a corporate event planner, and even as a wedding planner and a bar and bat mitzvah planner for a little bit. So I took some of the disciplines, being on a microphone, being very comfortable being in front of people, understanding how to work a room and control a room and to meter your speech, and understanding patterns of communication and how they work. So I think what I learned as I got into my early 40s is I had to play to my strengths. I'm a big believer in what they call strength-based leadership, and I don't know if you guys have ever spoken about that in your travels or as you're interviewing people. But there's a guy named Tom Rath who wrote a book called Strength-Based Leadership, and it's fairly old, and it was in conjunction with Gallup, the Gallup polling agency. And basically, what strength-based leadership is, it's almost a Myers-Briggs kind of left-right survey. So you take a survey for about 15 minutes, and it just gives you a series of questions online. You buy the book, and then it gives you a code. You log into their website, and you take the survey. You take the test left, right, left, right, left, right. And what it ends up doing through the course of those 15 minutes is gathers all of your answers, and then it spits out a profile to you, which is basically the 4 strengths out of the 32 core strengths that Rath had lined out in his book. And it's fascinating on a number of levels, mostly because it's just so incredibly accurate, you guys. It's such an amazing tool. And the philosophy of it is very cool because they're not trying to concentrate on the things that you need to get better at. Like, I'm nobody, like you said, you probably would make a great teacher. Like, I'm not your accountant, guys. Like, don't put me out what you want. I'm creative. I'm not an accountant, different side of my brain. It doesn't quite connect. But with Rath and with strength-based leadership, it allows you not only to focus on your own strengths and the things that you're good at, it also, when you're working with a team, like you guys working as a team, gives you some great insight into the strengths of the people that you're working with. And then, henceforth allows you to sort of leverage the things that each one of you guys are good at that maybe the other doesn't necessarily have such strength or isn't necessarily so predisposed to being good at. Super powerful tool, and I highly recommend it to the people that are listening out there for sure.
No, I love that, man. I love, cool. I love that insight because we've talked about it on the show to a degree, not from the angle you're coming at, but basically staying in your genius, right? Same concept right. To a certain degree, but a little bit dumbed down, right? It's more like, hey, play to your strengths, play to what you're good at, right? If you're doing something that you're not good at, how much of a waste of time is that to you, right? And for me, I leverage exactly. Yeah. I leverage virtual assistants now to where I was like, I would dread some of the things I would have to do for my business. My digital marketing agency was eating me alive because I'm like, man, I'm good at all of this stuff, but I don't like doing this stuff, but I'm doing it anyways, right? I was the little guy in the trench sitting there digging the ditch and just like, can't do that, man. You got to play to your strengths. And once I weeded all that out, man, everything in business just got better.
Well, and the money does come when you're good at stuff. But I think the mistake that a lot of people get into for is pursuing that as the top of their list and the biggest goal that they have. And money doesn't buy you happiness. It can certainly help along the way. There's no question. Like, let's stay away from those cliches because we've all heard them all a million times.
Right.
Let's be honest with each other. It helps to be able to pay your mortgage when you're in the pursuit of the things that you like to be able to do.
Sure, so you're not going to be happy if you can't do that. That's good. That's a fact.
Or you just have to strip your lifestyle and your expectations down to the very barest minimum, which I think when you're in your 20s is a good call. I think that's okay. I was in an unusual situation for someone our age, from my generation, because I was married so young. I married my first wife at 20. Idiot. But, it happened, and I made good on it. And I had a child at 24, which was less idiotic, but still, I put myself in something of a position where I always had belief in myself. I've always carried that forward with whatever I do. I always feel like I'm going to end up landing on my feet. I have a ridiculous amount of faith in myself, for better or for worse. It's probably caused me to make some poor decisions in the past, but I do. But by the same token, I always had to make sure that I was able to pay rent. I was able to support a child. I was able to support a wife who would prefer to stay home rather than working a full-time job and shuffling our kids off into daycare. So to me, it was a balancing act. It was always a balancing act. And even to this degree, because I'm a single dad again of a 13-year-old, as I said, and it's still a balancing act, trying to balance music, trying to balance a team building company, which I ostensibly run from 2,500 miles away, guys, because I live in Delaware, and my company, all of my staff, all of our events, or 95% of our events are on the West Coast. So this constant juggling of these different disciplines and these things, I couldn't possibly function if I hadn't learned how to multitask, and I couldn't possibly function at the level that I function at if I didn't have a real passion for all of those kinds of things that I'm doing. And furthermore, the money has to be there as well. There's no question about it.
Yeah, you've got to have that balance. Well, yeah, I mean, so it's interesting that you run your company that's in Silicon Valley. You're in Delaware. You run your company that's in Silicon Valley. So other side of the country, which is really impressive. Can you talk a little bit about that? TeamBuilding ROI is a company that you built to help companies plan and execute team building exercises, right? So you create experiences for companies for teams to come in and do these really cool events. And obviously with the pandemic though, that's really kind of thrown a wrench in the whole business plan, right? The whole business model. But you mentioned this before that you've been able to adjust. What was that like? What was the company like pre-pandemic, and then how did you adjust, and what's it like now?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that I really find fascinating and hopefully helpful to other people as we talk through it. I mean, we started off, as I said, in 2011 in Silicon Valley, and I was living in San Jose, which is, quote unquote, the capital of Silicon Valley. So as I'm sure you guys know, when you live in that area, Mountain View and Sunnyvale and Palo Alto, all the way up to San Francisco, you're basically surrounded by the largest tech companies and really some of the most successful Fortune 500 companies in the world. So we're super fortunate that our client base is Apple and Google and Facebook are our three biggest clients, and Cisco and Yahoo and Intel and HP and Adobe and Salesforce and on, Genentech and Roche and all of those massive companies. So proximity to that was really helpful in terms of starting off. So we started off with a little bit of investment. We actually had a couple series. We had a Series A investment, which was minimal. There were three of us, and I think we probably took $40,000 or $50,000 in investment, and then a Series B of another $50,000. And then through the course of the next 3 or 4 years, bought people off, sold this and that to, where it's just myself and my partner, Jay, who's the boots on the ground. So Jay actually lives in San Jose. He's the one that staffs. He's what I guess you would call our VP of operations and co-owner. I would be the sales and marketing face of the company, I guess. Well, I mean, I guess you could call us president or CEO. I always feel pretty stupid. It's a 2-person company. So my actual official title is chief people person. I mean, we can't take ourselves that seriously. It's a freaking team building company. So we had a really rough run the first 3 or 4 years. There's a lot of competition out there for our business because of those companies we were just talking about. But, through attrition of other companies falling by the wayside, and just through constant wearing away and meeting people and networking and marketing and finding the right fits for the right companies, we really had a great run of success. In the last 5 years, you guys, we crushed it. 2 years ago, we did 214 events. And then last year we did 196 events. And the year before, I think we did 165 events. And our revenue is, getting up towards $750,000 a year in just gross revenue. And we operate on a really, nice margin of about 65% because our overhead is so low. So we got fat is the bottom line. And we felt really good about ourselves. And of course, karma is a bitch, right? And every time you start to feel good about yourself, here comes that boomerang swinging back around and nail you in the back of the head. So no one could have ever predicted what had happened in March. I went to Los Angeles for work. We had just opened an office in LA. So we're based in Northern California, but we had opened an office in Los Angeles and in San Diego, and we were geared up. I had 16 hotel partners down there who were referring business. And we were, like I said, we were feeling really good about ourselves. And I came back from Los Angeles in January. I'd stayed at a hotel out at LAX. which houses all of the Chinese flight attendants. The hotel shall remain nameless, but in any event, I came back from LA in mid-January, and I had, you guys, the worst cough I've ever had in my life for about 2 weeks. Couldn't sleep, full chest pain, back pain, body aches, never ran a fever. But, in retrospect, and I have not had an antibody test. I've been tested for COVID and I'm negative. I actually just got results today because we're around older people and I'm around my son's grandmother every once in a while. So I want to get tested just as a precaution. But anyway, March came around and the proverbial crap hit the fan. And so we looked at each other knowing that the first thing that was going to shut down was the events business, of course, because of the very nature of what we do is bringing people together. So we had an option: go on unemployment and try and wait out the storm and hope that our clients would come back to us, or pivot, persevere, and see where we could go. So what we did is we went into the lab, you guys, and we created these 5 virtual team building programs through the use of Zoom technology or WebEx or Microsoft Meetings. It's a fairly flexible platform in which we facilitate and operate these programs. But in point of fact, we developed these 6 programs in about 4 weeks. We took them to market in about 5 weeks after demoing them and rolling them out to our friends and family and some of our valued clients that beta tested these programs for us. So we developed these 5, and starting in May through the end of this month, I think we've got like 45 of these bad boys either already facilitated or set up. Now, the gross revenue for these events is a fraction of what our normal team building event would be. So in theory, a team Olympics or something that's in person for 50 people would be about $3,000, if it was an in-person event. These virtual events, it's like 1,200 or 1,300. So we've certainly taken it. Now, obviously, the revenue is lower, the gross revenue, but the margins are way higher because it's literally just what you guys are doing. We're sitting there facilitating these online programs, so there is no, there's no overhead to speak of other than hosting fees for our website. But at least what we've done is we've kept the wolves at bay. We're weathering the storm. We've stayed relevant. We're in a place where we have done about 10 Apple and Cisco events and a few Google and Facebook events. We're staying relevant to these guys. And so what's happening is they remember that we're still in the business. They're appreciative that we're able to still facilitate for these guys at a fraction of the cost. And the hope is when there's a COVID vaccine, hopefully sooner rather than later, and things at least come back to semi-normal, who's the first guy that they're going to call? I think the smart money's on me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you're staying in front of people, you're keeping your existing clients happy. You can get, referrals from your existing clients saying, hey, we actually, through this whole pandemic experience, we were able to rely on TeamBuilding ROI to create these awesome virtual experiences. We couldn't have, asked for better customer service and adaptability. And yeah, I mean, that's amazing.
Well, panic sets in, and you guys know what that panic feels like a little bit. You get the tightening in the chest, the elevated blood pressure, the sleepless nights, the wondering about what your next move is going to be. How are you going to survive this? Well, I can tell you guys, because I'm a little bit older than you through experience, I've been through it a couple of times. And I went through 9/11 when I had a massive music deal on the table that disintegrated as soon as that madness came down. And then again, I went through a move and a career change in 2009, when the recession hit in 2009. So at least through the benefit of experience of having weathered the storm a couple times, that's where that supreme, self-confidence comes from. It's not arrogance, but it's a feeling like I know that no matter what, I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to be okay because I'm going to be able to make the best of whatever situation has been offered and presented to me. I have enough outlets through music and through team building and through my family and just through exercise or whatever to be able to make a bad situation maybe a little bit better. And at the end of the day, you guys know this. It's always about your approach. You're always going to have stuff thrown at you your entire life. Really, where the happiness and where the confidence comes from is in your approach to whatever that particular situation is. And as I said, I've learned it from experience, whether it's through marriages or whether it's through failed businesses or whether it's through being a paralegal at the shadiest law firm you've ever seen, which I did for a couple of years too, and just waiting for that phone call and that subpoena, to come down. So I feel good. I feel good now. I mean, we certainly haven't come out of the woods yet. I don't know what next year looks like, but even if something happened to the point where I had to walk away from it, I'm going to be okay doing whatever it is. I can live cheaply and I can stay sane and I can stay sober. And that's really kind of where I'm at in my life right now.
Yeah, man. I mean, when you look at it though, I mean, what you just described as far as the pivot from the pandemic that, we're all experiencing, that's like as real as entrepreneurship can get, though. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When you see it in its rawest form, and we try to say, guys, don't let obstacles get in our way. Don't let obstacles get in your way and deter you to close shop, because you could have took your basketball or your ball and walked home, bro, fold it up, right? Like, it's a wrap. Let's go ahead and get on the unemployment. But it wasn't about that, man. It was about what can we do? What can we do with the existing technology we have today? Man, excuses get in a lot of people's ways, right? We always say why we can't do something and why we can't continue to go forward. But when as many whys as you can do something, there's more whys that you can and come out on the end better at the end of it. You might not at the end of the day bringing in the same amount of money from these events, but like you said, your overhead's down. All you're having to do is cover the Zoom cost or whatever it is to go live on these things, or to record them and host webinars or whatever it is that you do, man. And that's just powerful. And I know what you just said will resonate with our listeners, man. And listening to stories like that, man, get me pumped up, dude. Cause I'm just like, this is where it's at.
I'll tell you what, I mean, I am so internally competitive. I grew up in a competitive sports background. I played basketball my whole life. And even though I'm a short little half Jewish kid, I still thought I was going to be in the NBA, man. I thought I was going to make it, Came to find out everybody grew and I stopped. So that dream died pretty hard. So I took my competitive spirit and my competitive nature into some other avenues. And musically, it's sort of the dichotomy of art and competition. It's almost like a battle of the bands. I'm nauseated by the thought of that. I don't think music and art should be a competitive thing. When I play games with my kids, I certainly don't let them win, but I'm happy if they beat me. I've taught them something and I'm proud of them. We play competitive cornhole with some of my boys. And even when I go play a pickup basketball game, I'm able to enjoy the experience and the process without having to win. I've really come a long way, as a kid to now. But here's where this changes. I'm so competitive with myself. I can't allow myself to let myself down. If I'm not able to live with myself at night and look myself in the mirror and be like, what are you doing, dude? How are you trying to make this work? That's, to me, is that slippery slope that I never want to get on, because I feel like if I get complacent or if I feel like I let myself slip, then it's going to pervade every aspect of my life, whether it's as a musician or as a business owner or as a parent or as a human trying to function in a very jacked up world right now. So to me, the competition that mirror has turned inward. And so now what I do is I take that competitive spirit and I say, okay, how am I going to do better than I did yesterday? Am I going to let myself down? And I know that by extension, the people that are relying on me, there's a good chunk of people, you guys, that are relying on me on the day to day and on the week to week. I have to believe that if I'm not let myself down, again, by extension, those people are going to benefit from it as well. So I don't want to beat you necessarily at something, but I definitely don't want to let you beat me either. So I'm going to do that by taking it and making it work for me, but not in an outward sense where I want to smash you. It's just more like I'm going to smash myself, and then hopefully you guys will be in line with that.
For sure, no doubt. So Ryan, man, let's touch on your progressive rock band called Little King, man. I know we've talked about it a little bit already, but we talked to a couple of musicians on the show recently, and with all that, they all have a strong entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, it seems like a lot of people are like, why are you bringing some of these people on the show? And they're asking us, why is this? But I mean, an artist, a musician, I mean, come on, if you can't throw them in the entrepreneurial game, I mean, who can, right? I mean, so with that said, man, and that strong entrepreneurial spirit we've witnessed, and so far they've been some of the best interviews on our show, I believe. So how have you been able to balance the business of music with the creativity freedom you need as a musician?
It's a great question, Clint. It's a real dichotomy in a couple ways. First of all, I'm embarrassed by self-promotion. I don't enjoy it. I love the creative process. I love the self-satisfaction that comes with producing and creating something and taking it from soup to nuts and seeing it. I'm a builder. I like to build things. And so music is no different. I'm building an album. And as Little King, right? The name of the band is Little King. And people sometimes say Little Kings. And I'm like, there's only one king. So I have always been in control of the lyrics and the music and the production of the album and even the art, down to the artwork in terms of giving direction. I'm a project manager when it comes to my band. I really am. So I hire my friends to play with me. Every single person that's ever played on a Little King album, and we're probably at 20 people almost over 20 some odd years. I'm managing them. I'm kind of giving them some direction. I don't play bass or piano. I don't play the drums. I can't tell them what to do, but I can give them encouragement to be the best that they are. So from that standpoint, I think I got into it, honestly, you guys, as a project manager from a band, just because musicians are so notoriously flaky. And I didn't want to leave chance, my ability to create a legacy of music based on someone else's organizational capabilities or as you said, an entrepreneurial spirit. Because more often than not, that doesn't reside in most musicians. They are pure artists, a lot of them, not most, but a lot of them can't get out of their own ways, quite honestly. I think they're so consumed by their right brain and the creative side that left brain kind of gets left behind. So for me, I knew early on that if I was going to do this and make it last, I had to be the one that was the driver and the project manager. So, from that standpoint, even though it's embarrassing to advertise myself and even on social media to post songs and snippet and lyrics, because everybody kind of hates that guy. I feel like, I don't want to be that guy that I hate. It's a real Jedi mind trick a little bit to feel that way. So I'm still, after all this time, trying to find my way to balance, self-promotion and getting the word out about what I've created and something that I'm clearly very proud of, and I'm proud of my friends and what their contributions have been in my music. But by the same token, when someone scrolls on Instagram or sees me on Facebook or wherever, they don't go, "Oh my God, not that dude again, shut up." So if you have the answer, I'm all ears for it. It's a real balancing act. And quite honestly, even at this age, 48 and doing it for as long as I still haven't found the balance. I'm still not comfortable. I mean, I have a couple of publicists. I have one in the UK and one that works here, and they're great about it. Every once in a while, they're like, "Come on, dude, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "You do it. I don't really want to do it.
Yeah.
I'll do it for somebody else. Like, you want me, as your publicist, like, I'll go all day for my friends. But for myself, it's just, like I said, I hate that guy, and I don't want to be that guy. And somehow I turned into that guy. So that's where I'm at.
That's funny. Yeah. So self-promotion is a little different. It feels a little different than helping somebody else, because if you're helping your friends or another band, even if you don't know them, you're helping somebody else. But when it's yourself, you feel a little selfish or a little like you're just, tooting your own horn and promoting yourself, which is, I can see that.
Embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when it's art, you're like,
especially when it's art, right?
My art's better than that other art. Check my art out.
Right.
And art is subjective, man. I mean, Justin Bieber, Spears, Britney, Perry, Katie. How many records do those people sell? I spent exhaustive amounts, you guys, of time writing and rewriting, editing and tearing down and building back up lyrics and music, and 1,000 hours of playing the same song on my guitar over and over again to make sure that the chord progression makes sense. My kids hate my music because they've heard it so many times.
Hear it all the time over.
Oh my God, Dad, shut up. Please.
Yeah.
So the exhausted amount of time and energy and editing, really as an editor, which is what it comes down to being once the creation is at least somewhat formed, that amount of time. And then, and then I want to talk about that. I want to advertise that to people. I don't know. And at the end of the day, that's not what wins in the music business anyway. We know. And I don't have to tell you guys, what wins. We see how many hits these guys get. We see how many streams. Ed Sheeran, I think, has the most popular song on Spotify. God bless Ed Sheeran. I'm sure he's a great guy. 2.8 billion streams of one song. That's $10 million in revenue, even on Spotify, which is like 0.00003 cents on every spin, right? And the dude's made 10 million on one song. So those are the guys, and I don't aspire to be at that level. I couldn't create music if I wanted to that would get me to that level. So all I can really do at the end of it is be the project manager, make it the best that Ryan can be, make it the best that Little King can be, let the chips fall where they may. And if people don't buy it, that's cool. I'm going to make another freaking album anyway. And wash, rinse, and repeat. Do it again.
Exactly. Well, yeah. And it's a good creative outlet for you, right? I mean, that's especially if you have that talent to be able to you have your business, and, you've got team building ROI, you've got this creative outlet you can do with what you want. If it might be a little different if your end goal was to be Ed Sheeran and that was it, somebody like, that would obviously put more pressure on it, but it's almost nice that you don't have that pressure. You're trying to make it the best you can. But at the same time, you're just like, it is what it is. The people who listen to it, great. And if they don't find out about it, it just is what it is. So,
well, again, the pressure is internal. It's not external.
Right.
No one can be harder on me than me, and that's a fact. The other part of it is that I found that, especially with the last record, we made an album called Occam Spoil, which was released at the end of 2019. And all of my albums, when they come out, I don't know what the reception is going to be like. You don't really know, but I did kind of come out of the studio this time feeling a little differently. Like, okay, there may be something here that I've captured as through maturity or experience, or potentially the combination of who I was playing with, or potentially maybe a little different approach this time in terms of the writing and the recording process. So I did emerge from the studio this time feeling a little different, a little more confident. Lo and behold, people glommed onto it. It's been great. The reviews have been incredibly positive and flattering. People have streamed the record. They're into it. As reticent as I am to kind of promote, I guess I've learned maybe a few things about promotion over the years, and have had a really good team. So I'm super thrilled. It's been really gratifying and really flattering this time, and it's really pushed me to kind of create. I mean, I've been in quarantine for 4 months now, just like you guys, or however long it's been, 3.5 months. So we couldn't tour. We had tours booked. We had festival dates. I love playing live. It's my outlet. I can't tell you guys how big a bummer it's been to not be able to do it and have to cancel all these festival shows this summer. But as an artist, what was I going to do? Sit home and not create? So what I did is I just wrote songs, you guys. And in this environment, and what we're all going through right now, if there's not enough fodder out there, if there's not enough material for you to create art out of, you probably ought to check yourself, because there's so much going on. There's never been a more fertile time in my lifetime, for creating art. So I really focused on making new music, and instead of being able to go out on the road, we're just going to go right back in the studio in a month and a half and get it done and see what happens again.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems like you've really capitalized on, you've really, done the most with these last few months. And you really like a glass is half full kind of guy, obviously, making the most opportunity out of your business and your art. So you have a lot to juggle between those two things, plus being a single dad, obviously. What does a day in your life look like? I mean, I'm sure it looks different now, with what's going on, and you're not getting out there as much, not doing shows, but what does a typical day look like? Like, how do you split your time between everything?
Yeah, it's a great question too. I toggle a lot, as is my nature. I have a lot of stuff going on at the same time. My son's with me about, I would say, 60% of the time. So he's probably with me a little bit more than half. We are getting ready to relocate back to the West Coast here in a month and a half. So that's going to change. He's actually going to be with me full time for a while, which is great. I'm excited, but it definitely presents a different set of challenges and issues in terms of operating a business, being able to travel, things like that. It's cool. I'll manage it. I always do, but it is different. But because I'm on the East Coast and because my business is based on the West Coast, I get most of my music stuff done between 9 a.m. and 12 a.m. And I'm an early riser now. I actually quit drinking like about 7 months ago. I like to have a good time for sure, you guys. I was in that zone for far too long. So, precipitated by a few unfortunate events at the end of last year, I'm now in a place where I haven't touched alcohol for about 7 months, which has been an eye opener. Oh my God, because I like to party. I'm a drinker, and I kind of always have been since I was in my 20s. And so pulling that veil off and understanding what it's like to know how you're going to feel every morning and not to have to struggle with clarity and memory and the ability to be able to be enthusiastic without having to have some sort of chemical, enhancement to it has really been an extraordinary thing for me, you guys. So I do want to mention that. So now that I am clear and fresh and feeling really good every morning, my day basically starts about 7:15 in the morning. I sleep about 6 or 7 hours. It's really all, that I need. I'm up. I exercise every day. My son, when he's with me, is a teenager, so he sleeps till like 2 p.m.
Right.
If
Sounds
I let
about
him,
right.
you guys remember those days.
Yep.
But I'm handling the music stuff basically between 9 a.m. and noon. That's my 3 hours before things open up on the West Coast because I'm 3 hours ahead. So it's actually really nice that I'm able to do that. And when I say handle it, I'm editing my website because I'm in charge of that, handling whatever social media. I play guitar for an hour every single morning without fail, unless I'm on the road or something. So I'm make sure that I keep my chops fresh, and that's sort of my meditation time too. And I think to all the people out there that are listening, if you don't meditate, if you don't have some sort of meditation, even if it isn't and it's a little different, it's critical for focus, and it's critical for entrepreneurs to be able to calm the mind and put yourself in a place where you're not necessarily always focused and worried about the bottom line or making your business happen. Because boy, when you're able to refresh yourself and sort of reset every morning, the ability to be able to attack things in with a fresh perspective, I think is critical. So that's my morning. And then the rest of the day I'm reactive. I'm a little more proactive now because we're trying to generate some more interest in the virtual team building. We've kind of gone national with that, but for the most part, for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been in a reactive phase where I answer every email. Communication is massively important in any business. It's particularly important in our business, in the events business, because if they're emailing me or submitting an inquiry through Yelp or through Google AdWords or wherever, if I'm not getting to them in the next 30 seconds, they're moving on. And they're calling 3 other people or emailing 3 other people in addition to me. And I honestly think that probably the biggest key for our success has been my response time is ridiculous. I blow people's minds with it all the time. They're like, dude, I just emailed you. And I'm like, hey, I work for a living too. I don't know what to tell you. But it's amazing, right? Like I had a mentor named Frank. Frank's a genius, and he's in his 70s. And he always told me, he's like, Ryan, half the battle is just showing up. And he's absolutely right. And part of showing up, quite honestly, is just being as receptive as possible. So I put myself in a position, you guys, where I'm always able to respond as quickly as possible, whether it's email. I always pick up the phone. I don't care what time of day or night it is. And so even though I'm in a reactive place, business-wise for the most part, I make sure that once that initial contact or that inquiry has been made, that they're like my children, and I carry those clients all the way to the end as best I possibly can. So that's my day. And then in the evenings, I make dinner. I like to cook. I live right near the beach, at least have for the last 6 years. So I walk to the beach quite a bit, play guitar in the evenings, entertain members of the opposite sex every once in a while.
There you go.
Right?
There you go, yeah.
I live in Delaware, randomly enough, right?
Yeah,
we get all the girls from DC, we get the girls from Philly, we get the girls from Baltimore, we get the Jersey Shore, which is a trip. Even down in North Carolina, every once in a while, I spend some time down by you guys. So you got to have some time to have a social life too to keep myself sane. So
sure,
it's a full life, bro. Honestly, it's a very full life. There's no doubt.
Yeah, that's a good balance. Yep,
for sure.
Yeah.
So, man, through your entrepreneurial journey, Ryan, from the highs to the lows, brother, what has been the most difficult thing about being an entrepreneur, man?
I think it's just uncertainty, Clint. Honestly, my 401k is my equity in my business. I've put a little aside here and there through the years, and had a savings account for college that I had to actually cash in because times were so tough back in the day. So I've been okay at saving money. I'm fortunate that I come from a good family, so I maybe have a better safety. We're being honest here, right? So I maybe have a better safety net than some people who are entrepreneurs get into. But through the course of the years, I've been able to save money and been able to buy a house and have the things that I wanted. Come to find out, that stuff is completely meaningless to me. Doesn't bring me any lasting joy at all. Cars and houses and things like that come and go. My peace of mind and my ability, as I said before, to live with myself and understand that I'm happy and creating something has been the biggest. But dude, that uncertainty of things like a pandemic coming down and not knowing, if you're going to be able to save money, not knowing if the demand for your product is, not necessarily. Also, here's another one, dude, which I never talk about, but I think it's really interesting. You guys appreciate that. I'm a fairly politically active person. I have pretty strong opinions, believe it or not. Right? You guys are like, no way. But I do. I have pretty strong opinions about things that are happening in the world. And as someone that represents a company and has a business partner, as well as people who rely on me, I really have to shut my mouth a lot. I can't necessarily always speak my mind because I'm in the corporate world, and I got to understand that 40 to 50% of the people that I deal with don't agree with me. And so it's been, it's been that uncertainty. It's also been, the inability to really speak my mind and really come as clean as I possibly can in terms of how I feel about things that are going on in the universe, because I simply don't want to jeopardize my bottom line, and I don't want to jeopardize the bottom line of my partner and the people who work for me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's, business first, and just, it's good to kind of keep some things separate from that. And, really just focus on being a good business owner and boss, and figure out how to grow your business and just work with people. I mean, that's the cool thing about business. It kind of is it levels the playing field, and everybody's just on the same level. And so it's just, it's really, really cool, because we're all just, we're obviously, you're competing against different companies, like we all are, to some degree or another. But it's cool because we can all work together. We can all collectively, progress as entrepreneurs and as business owners. So, yeah.
And the progression thing is interesting. I think everybody has, and I appreciate all the things you just said, get a little more granular with the progression. I think we oftentimes as entrepreneurs don't really take a look at that big picture. What is progression? What does it mean? I bet, we've got 3 people on this little Zoom, and I bet it means different things to all 3 of us. And I bet if you had 50 different people in there, people might say, well, I want to make more money. There's the obvious part of it, right? I want to have a little bit more free time. Well, sure. Okay. Those things are sort of taken for granted, as you go through your journey. But what does progress mean to you? Progress to me means getting better at what I do. Progress to me means self-examination. How am I progressing as a human? How am I looking at myself? How am I able to make changes in my behaviors? How am I able to make changes in my business model? And how am I able to impart the things that I've learned, the wisdom? How am I better able to educate and mentor people that look up to me for some of those answers? So it would be an interesting, it's an interesting case study, and everybody that comes through these windows to say, well, what is progress to you? And so I think we're still defining it. I'm still defining what progress means. I think it may mean something different to yesterday. It may mean something tomorrow than it does today. But in asking and thinking about it today, I want to be more comfortable in my own skin. I want to be happier, and I definitely, more than anything, I want to be able to find that magical work-life balance. And that's, as a team building owner, that's what we preach to our clients. And again, I know you guys can relate to this. Practicing what we preach, that's progress. How do we practice what we preach? Do we even practice what we preach? Do people ask themselves that as they go through their lives and they go through their journey as business people? I wonder.
Yeah. Well, and I think being introspective is something that everybody can be. And if you're not introspective, I think it's really important to kind of take a look inward and figure out how you can get better as a person and as a business owner, because for any of us to think that we figured it all out is not, or that we know everything and we've got the exact right answer all the time. I mean, that's just not true. Or that, we just can't get any better than, like, man, can't get any better than what I'm doing now. That's not, that's just never true, no matter how far you get, how far you progress with, whatever key metrics you're measuring. So
one of the things that's come out of quarantine for myself and for my son is we do a ton of walking. The gyms have been closed, and I'm just not down to work out with a mask now. It's just not me. So we walk, 5, 6, 7 miles a day, basically. And my son, that's the time uninterrupted, where there's no technology, there's no phone calls, there's no madness swirling around us. And so we really have had a ton of really amazing conversations. And he's interested in entrepreneurship. Obviously, he's grown up around it. So he asks me pretty relevant, prescient questions. He's a super sharp kid. And I'm, of course, ridiculously proud of him. But, that goes to that saying. I think we all are. But one of the things we talked about just yesterday was that introspective piece. And also, what are the qualities that you admire the most in people? Who do you choose to emulate? And introspection is a big one. People who have the ability to look at themselves objectively, have that piece of empathy, look at themselves through someone else's eyes. And I call it active empathy. It's something that I preach to the people that I hire and the people I work with. When I say active empathy, it's almost literally stepping into the shoes or into the eyes of the person sitting across from you and looking back at yourself. And what do you see objectively? What are those people seeing when they're looking at you? And with Zoom, it's such amazing technology because I can literally see what you guys are looking at as we're talking to each other. This is the ultimate test of empathy and of active empathy. So that was the first thing. And the second quality that that I told him he was really interested in this one because it's in such short supply. How many good listeners do we really know? How many really excellent high level listeners do you guys know and do you come across in your daily life? And in my life, the answer is very few. It seems like most people are in a conversation waiting to get their 2 cents in, or waiting to take what they've just heard from you and then spin it back into serving their own agenda, rather than really internalizing, listening to something, internalizing it, thinking about it, processing it, and then using it, as you said, Andrew, introspectively as to how they can make that work for themselves. And so those are the two things that we spoke about yesterday, and had a really good, lively conversation about. It always devolves into him talking about his friends and into his mom, which I'm like, look, dude, Mom and I aren't married anymore. Don't ask me. There's a reason why your parents aren't married anymore, son. But I mean, those two pieces are something that we spent a lot of time talking about, not just yesterday, but over the course of the last 3 or 4 months.
That's very cool. Yeah,
I love that.
Really
I love that insight, man, because my thing is what you just said about listening. There's a big difference. When I was in high school, I had a high school teacher that told me, he was our English teacher, right? A lot of people didn't pay attention. They would hear what he was saying. Yeah. They wouldn't listen to what he was saying.
Well, as an English teacher,
right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's, and I think a lot of that as entrepreneurs and business owners, we actually have to actively listen to what our clients are saying. We can't just hear about their problem, right? Because if we're hearing half of what they say, even though they said another 50% of what they said, right? But we just heard one portion of it. We don't have the whole formula. So you have to listen, man. And I really think that just touched me, and I had to throw that in before we went any further because I didn't want to forget that. But
Clint, also, I think a huge part of this, as by extension, is, I want to say bad words, but I'm not going to cuss on your show.
Oh, man. We're explicit, so if you wanted to drop something, we're good, bro.
Okay, check your fucking ego at the door a little bit.
Yep.
No shit. You really don't. I don't know shit. I'm still learning. And so that listening piece and that ego piece are inextricably intertwined. Because if you're not really actively listening, then it seems to me that you think you already probably know the answer, and this person that's sitting with you has nothing to teach you. And that's the height of narcissism and egocentrism. And it just doesn't work. And people sense it. We all know those people where the ego gets in the way of their better judgment or their listening skills. And so for me, I take it almost as a personal affront when I'm having a conversation with somebody. I certainly don't know everything, but I definitely have had a unique path and a unique life experience. I'm one of one. There's nobody else that's had the exact same set of experiences that I have in the world. And every single person that we talk to is like that. So if I can't give and extend that same respect and courtesy to the people that I'm talking to, then how on earth can I expect them to have that same respect and courtesy for me? Check your ego at the door. You really don't know as much as you think you do. And if we're not learning from the people that we surround ourselves with, surround yourself with other people.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I love it. Well, Ryan, as we wrap up this episode, what do you think? What is there one piece of advice that you could offer our audience to kind of help them on their entrepreneurial journey? If you had to pick one.
Yeah, I think we've gone through a lot of them. To recap, follow your passion. That one is age old and tried and true. I think study, learn from your competitors, be a good listener. All of those things are important, but I think the most important one is make sure that you're being honest with yourself. Make sure that you're having that constant internal monologue where you're telling yourself the truth. Because first of all, you can't be honest with your clients, your employees, your boss, anybody, your anybody until you really are being honest with yourself. And that was something that I learned a little bit later in life, maybe than I should. I was always really good at kind of fooling myself into thinking that I was doing well, or fooling myself into thinking that I was maybe doing the right thing, or that things were black and white when they were much more about shades of gray. So that's probably the best piece of advice that I can leave everybody with. Is really have an ability to strip away the ego and all the other things and be able to have an honest conversation with yourself about what you're doing, how things are going, how people perceive you, and your path. And once I think you get to that place, you'll realize that there is no end to that destination. It's always a work in progress. And if it's always a work in progress, then you can relax a little bit. There's no goal. the goal is the journey itself. I know it's a cliche, but it's so friggin' true, you guys. And so once you're at that place where you're able to have that internal monologue, where you can have an honest conversation with yourself about anything that's going on, not just business, whether it's relationships, whether it's, do you have a drinking problem? Do you have a drug problem? What are you doing with your life? Get to that place where you can have an honest conversation with yourself. And I think then all the other things have at least the opportunity to fall in place.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Well, guys, I think that's a wrap for this episode. And from the both of us, Ryan, man, we want to thank you, brother, for taking the time out of your day to join us and adding value on what we're trying to do with our podcast.
My pleasure. Good job, you guys. I really appreciate it. Anything I can ever do to help anybody out there, feel free to share all my information. I answer emails all day. I'm absolutely happy to talk to anybody about music, corporate events, team building, teaching English, moving cross country 18 times in your life, or whatever else you guys can think of.
Love it. That's awesome. Yeah, well, we really appreciate it, Ryan. And, we know our audience will too. Guys, thank you so much for listening to That Entrepreneur Life. To learn more about what Ryan is working on, check out tbroi.com. If you like what you heard today, make sure to subscribe to us, to our podcast on iTunes and on any other major podcast directory. You can also find us on all the socials and on our website at thatentrepreneurlife.com.
And with that said, guys, we also want to give a quick shout out to all our family and friends, like always, to include all our listeners, followers, and subscribers. If you find value in our show, guys, please consider making a small donation. Even just a few dollars helps us keep things moving along and helps bring value to your entrepreneurial journey. Thanks for continuing to support what we do as entrepreneurs, guys. And don't forget to join us next week for another episode of That Entrepreneur Life.
Thanks for listening to That Entrepreneur Life podcast. Be sure to visit thatentrepreneurlife.com to join the conversation, access our show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode as we continue to add value. Until next time.